AITA, drama, secrets, confessions. Welcome to Trove Reddit.
Get out. You are no longer my daughter. My father's scream thundered across the Thanksgiving table, making a wine glass in my mother's hand tremble. The entire room fell silent. The golden roast turkey I had spent nearly $200 on still steamed on the table. But no one touched it. Every single eye locked on me as if I had just committed an unforgivable crime. My heart pounded like it was about to explode, yet my face remained cold and unreadable. I, Emily, 27 years old, a lawyer in New York, had just been disowned by my own parents in front of the entire family. All because I dared to speak one truth. One sentence that made them see me as a traitor. But what they didn't realize was that from that very moment, the game board had shifted. I would no longer be their puppet. I would become the one moving the pieces. If you've ever been looked down on by your own family, hit that subscribe button right now. This story is only just beginning. I was born in an old house, with peeling walls and a leaky roof whenever it rained. People say childhood is the most beautiful time of life, but for me, it felt like a black and white movie. My father worked as a road repairman, his back bent from carrying cement and steel. My mother took on every odd job she could find, from selling bread to cleaning in restaurants. And yet, despite all the hardship, they poured every bit of pride and spotlight onto my older brother Chris. Chris was the golden star of the family. Every time he scored a goal at school, my parents threw a little celebration. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in the corner of the room, clutching a worn-out book, wishing that someday, someone would praise me. Have you ever been forgotten by your own parents inside the very house you live in? I had no new shoes. No birthday cake with candles. No one ever asked me, "Are you okay?" But I had an old laptop that my mom begged off the owner of an internet cafe. The screen was cracked in the corner, the keyboard stuck on the letter A, yet to me, it was the whole world. I wrote essays on that keyboard. I learned to type fast, I studied law, I learned to turn words into weapons. While Chris kept making promises about one project after another, chasing dreams he never followed through on, I worked late into the night, every night. Every time my father scolded me, saying, "What does a girl know about arguing?" I silently made a promise to myself. One day, I would make him swallow those words. Once, I won the school's debate award. I brought the certificate home, my heart swelling with pride. My father glanced at it and asked, "Does it come with money?" I stayed silent, holding that certificate as if I were holding a wound. From that moment, I understood one thing. If I wanted recognition, I had to turn myself into someone unstoppable. What do you think? Can a girl who was constantly belittled rise above the boys who were endlessly pampered? The answer will shock you even more than what happened at the Thanksgiving table later. I never forgot the day I left my poor little town and walked through the gates of law school. No one came to see me off. There was no hug, no tears. My mother just shoved $50 into my hand and said, "Don't forget to send money back home." Can you imagine it? The most important day of your life beginning with a debt. I studied while working every side job I could find. Waitressing in cafes. Answering phones in offices. Some days I worked 3 shifts straight, sleeping less than 4 hours. Have you ever had to choose between buying food or buying your textbooks? But those were the days that forged my iron will. I stood in front of the mirror, dark circles under my eyes, and told myself, "Emily, you will not round here. You will rise." And I did rise. With my own trembling hands typing thousands of pages of law, I graduated with honors. The moment I held my diploma, I looked around the hall. No father, no mother, no Chris. Only the applause of strangers. And in that applause, I swore I would turn my loneliness into fuel. I started my internship at a prestigious law firm in New York. The first cases made me shake, but they also set my fire ablaze. Every time I won, I never called home to tell them, because I knew they didn't care. They only wanted to know how much money I was making. Have you ever tasted victory and still felt empty inside? Then the big opportunity came. A high-profile lawsuit where I was chosen as the lead assistant. The night before the trial, I looked out at the glowing city and thought, tomorrow, my life will change. And it did. After that victory, I was officially recognized as a full attorney, earning 3 times more than my peers. Yet instead of being proud, my family saw me as nothing more than a walking wallet. They didn't see me as Emily, the daughter they once dismissed. They only saw an endless stream of money. Do you want to know what happened the moment I stopped being their mobile bank? Don't forget to subscribe to hear the next part, because the real shock hasn't even begun. The more successful I became, the clearer the injustice in my own family revealed itself. I sent money home every single month. I paid off the bank so my father wouldn't lose the house. I bought Chris a car so he would have a vehicle to go to work. And what did I get in return? Nothing but words colder than ice. My father always looked at Chris with pride. The moment Chris said, "I'm thinking about starting a business," the whole family applauded as if he had just invented electricity. But when I announced my promotion, my father only muttered a quick then turned to Chris and asked, "So, how's your plan coming along? Have you ever felt like you were turned into a shadow in your very own family?" Once, I sent nearly $10,000 home so my parents could pay Grandma's hospital bills. The very next day, Chris posted photos from Vegas five-star hotels, tables full of champagne. I asked, "Where did you get the money for that?" He just shrugged. Family always helps each other out. You understand that bitter feeling when your sweat and tears are turned into a VIP ticket for someone else's luxury. My mother was even more ruthless. She always said, "Emily, no matter how successful a daughter is, she can't compare to a son. All Chris needs is the right opportunity, and he'll surpass you." Hearing that, I was furious and yet, I laughed. Because if opportunity means I'd break my back paying every bill while he lounges at home, then yes, he's already had the biggest opportunity of his life. Gradually, I realized I was no longer seen as a daughter in their eyes. I was just a wallet, an ATM card. They never called to ask me to visit. They only called when their bank accounts were running dry. You think a real family could ever treat their own child that way? And so I began asking myself one question. If I disappeared, if I stopped sending money, would they still see me as family? The answer came crashing down on me at that very Thanksgiving dinner. That Thanksgiving, I prepared everything like a fool who still believed my family would appreciate me. I woke up at 5 a.m., drove more than 3 hours, and brought food, wine, and gifts. A turkey the size of a suitcase, a pumpkin pie from the most famous bakery in town, and a bottle of red wine worth nearly $100. In my mind, at least today would be different. At least today I would be seen as part of the family. Have you ever had the illusion that if you just gave more, you would finally receive love in return? When I walked into the house, my mom gave me a quick hug, then went right back to playing a game on her phone. My dad only nodded from the sofa, his eyes glued to the basketball game. No one asked if I was tired from the long drive. No one cared to see what I had brought. That feeling was worse than being ignored by a stranger. I quietly went into the kitchen and started cooking. The sound of chopping, the smell of melting butter, the oven beeping. Everything was on me. It wasn't until 2 p.m. that Chris finally dragged himself into the house. Empty-handed, holding nothing but his phone. And do you know what happened next? My parents rushed over and hugged him like they had just welcomed home a king. "Our boy is back," my dad exclaimed. My mom looked at him with the kind of love I have never received in my entire life. I pressed my lips together and kept peeling potatoes like some maid in the very house I once paid to keep. Dinner began at 4 p.m. My dad sat at the center, carving the turkey, while retelling Chris's basketball glory from 10 years ago. My mom asked him about a job interview, and then beamed with hope. "I believe you'll be a manager soon." Meanwhile, I shared about the biggest contract of my career turning point that could change my entire life. And my mom only replied coldly, "Yeah, that's nice. But don't forget to help Chris with his business funds." At that moment, the turkey suddenly tasted bland. The wine burned bitter in my throat. I looked around the table and realized I was nothing more than an uninvited guest. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your whole family celebrated the success of a failure, while your own victories were tossed aside like garbage? I subscribe now to hear the next part, because right at that dinner, I dropped the bomb that left my entire family in stunned silence. I endured the entire dinner, swallowing each dry bite of turkey, as if I were swallowing their contempt. But when my mother turned to Chris, held his hand, and said, "You'll succeed someday, you just need to wait for the right time," I knew I had reached my limit. Wait for the right time. He had been waiting for 3 years, leeching off my money, while I worked myself to the bone through my youth. Have you ever heard words of praise given to a failure, while you, the one supporting the entire family, were met only with indifference? I set my glass down, my hands trembling, though my voice remained steady. I need to pause financial support for a few months. My company needs capital to expand. The whole table went silent. The clatter of silverware hitting plates sounded like a bomb. My father glared at me, his voice sharp. "What did you just say?" My mother froze, and Chris shot me a look full of hatred. I took a deep breath, then spoke each word clearly. "In the past 3 months, I've paid nearly $10,000 for all of you. I need to invest in my own future." It was the truth, but to them, it was treated like treason. My father slammed the table and shouted, "You've changed. Money has made you selfish. Selfish. After everything I had carried for them." Hearing that, I laughed, though it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Have you ever been called selfish by the very people who drain you dry? My mother leaned down and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "You're just jealous of your brother." That sentence was the final stab. I stood, grabbed my purse. Before leaving, I turned, looked straight at my father, and said, "If your wonderful son is so capable, let him pay the $10,000. Then I walked out, leaving behind a room frozen in silence. Outside, the cold wind slapped my face, but my chest burned hot. I knew, from that moment on, this family was no longer a refuge. It was a battlefield. No one expected that the explosion that day would come from me. I had stayed silent for too long, letting them trample all over me. But right there at the dinner table, I stood up, my voice sharp as steel. Has any of you ever wondered who actually keeps this family alive?" The entire room went silent, every pair of eyes fixed on me, as if I had just fired a gun inside the house. Have you ever said something that made your whole family choke on their words? Chris sneered and shot back. You think the few bucks you send are such a big deal? I slammed my hand down on the table so hard the wine glass shattered, red wine spilling out like blood. Not a few bucks, I shouted. I paid off the mortgage, Mom's hospital bills, even the utility bills you kept forgetting to pay. My father's face turned red, but this time he didn't dare cut me off. My mother covered her mouth in shock, while Chris trembled, but still tried to puff himself up. I'll be successful soon enough. I laughed, the sound cold as ice. You've been saying that for 10 years. Enough. I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag and tossed them onto the table. They were bank statements. The numbers danced on the pages, proof of every dollar I had spent to keep them afloat. You want the truth? If it weren't for me, this house would have been taken by the bank last year. The table fell silent. My father stared at the papers, my mother's eyes filled with tears, and Chris was completely speechless. The air grew heavy, the only sound the ticking clock counting down like a bomb. I knew I had just detonated the truth they had all been pretending not to see. But strangely, I didn't feel afraid. I felt free. Have you ever experienced the feeling that just by speaking one truth, the whole world around you collapses? I folded my arms, let out a sigh, and said my final words. From now on, whoever eats, pays. I am no longer this family's ATM machine. Then I turned my back, walked out the door, and left behind a dinner more shattered than the broken glass on the floor. I subscribe now, because the next part will reveal the cruel revenge my family had in store for me after that dinner. That night, I sat alone in my silent apartment, the yellow light casting shadows across the cracks in the wall. No calls, no messages, not a single word of concern from my family. Only a suffocating silence so thick I could hear the beat of my own heart. Have you ever felt so lonely that it seemed like the whole world had turned its back on you? I opened a bottle of wine, drinking gulp after burning gulp, my tears blending with the bitterness of the alcohol. Every time I closed my eyes, the chaos of that dinner table replayed. My mother's words, my father's stare, Chris's mocking smirk. All drilling deeper into my mind. I asked myself, was I wrong to speak the truth? But the very next second, I let out a bitter laugh. If the truth made them despise me, then was that love ever real? In that moment, I suddenly realized something. Since childhood, I had been running nonstop. Running to escape poverty, running to prove myself, running to keep this family standing. But never once did I run for myself. Never once did I live for myself. Do you know that feeling, spending your whole life just trying to please everyone else? I looked around the room, cluttered with unpaid bills, stacks of work documents, and an unopened suitcase. Everything stood as undeniable proof. I had given too much, yet no one was truly there for me. A pain that cut straight to the bone. But from that pain, a small flame sparked within me. I whispered to myself, enough. From now on, I will live differently. That lonely night was no longer a pit of despair, but a turning point. I realized I didn't need my parents' approval, nor Chris's hollow praise. I only needed one thing. To finally be myself. That day, I walked into my family's mansion with heavy shoes but a blazing heart. No more trembling, no more fear. I knew this would be the final confrontation. Have you ever gone to see your family and felt like you were stepping onto a battlefield? They sat there, dripping with arrogance, still convinced I would kneel and beg for forgiveness. My mother folded her arms, my father furrowed his brows, and Chris smirked like someone who thought victory was already his. But what they didn't know was that I had prepared a bomb to flip the entire game. I laid a thick stack of documents on the table, each page falling like a sharpened blade. It was the full evidence of Chris's shady dealings that I had quietly gathered for so long. In that moment, the entire room fell silent. Can you imagine the look on his face right then? My father slammed the table in fury, my mother gasped in shock with her hand over her mouth. But I didn't stop. I said it all. I spoke of the injustices I endured, the favoritism, the way they turned me into an outcast in my own family. I didn't scream, I spoke with a calmness so cold it terrified them more than any shout ever could. Have you ever seen a child stay silent their whole life, only to one day rise and speak every truth? Chris tried to fight back, but each piece of evidence I laid out cut into him like a blade. For the first time, he was speechless before me. For the first time, my parents looked at me not with disdain, but with confusion and fear. In that moment, I knew. The power had shifted. I was no longer the disowned daughter. I was the only one who could destroy this family's reputation. The final confrontation was never about revenge, it was about freeing myself. I stood, looked straight at them, and said, "From this day on, I no longer belong to this family. But you will never forget my name." Do you think that sometimes walking away is the greatest victory of all? I subscribe now, because in the next part I'll reveal the shocking ending. The price my family paid after that day. After the final confrontation, I walked out of that mansion with dry eyes. No more tears, no more trembling. I walked like someone who had just broken free from chains after decades of captivity. Have you ever felt like you lost everything? Yet somehow it felt like the beginning of everything. My family fell into chaos after that day. Chris was exposed for his dirty schemes. My parents lost face with both relatives and business partners. The house that once echoed with fake laughter now stood as nothing more than cold, empty walls. As for me, I moved to a new city, starting from zero. But that very zero was freedom. Do you think that sometimes losing everything can actually be the greatest gift fate could give you? I learned that money can buy silence, but it can never hide the truth. I realized that sometimes family can be far more cruel than any enemy outside. And most importantly, you only truly grow up when you dare to stand, when you dare to say no to injustice even if it comes from your own parents. Would you have the courage to do that if you were in my place? Now, when I look back, I feel no anger, no resentment. I see it all as just an old chapter turned and closed. I know I deserve new happiness, and I believe you do too. If you are being belittled, abandoned, or treated unfairly, remember this. Your worth is never defined by others. That worth lives in your own heart and in your determination. Do you believe that everyone can be a doorway to a better life? This is not just my story, it might also be yours. And if you're hearing these words, take it as a sign. It's time to rise, to change, and to rewrite your own destiny. Don't forget to subscribe, because even more dramatic and unexpected stories are yet to come.